if you're a real estate professional and your broker is not updating you every single week like my broker does, watch this video and think about what you're missing out on.
So you got to bear with me
No.
this morning. I'm not at 100%, but I will not miss a motivation Monday. It's like I'm a little under the weather today. So we're gonna
Hey,
power
man.
through and we're gonna kick
Yeah.
off 2025 powering through.
It's Friday this week. Lewis Firm and I, my co-VP, talked about the importance of being able to explain the market. And I said, hey, we talk about this every once in a while on Motivational Monday, where we have the opportunity to hear from Robert and really give him the opportunity to, express to us what's happening in the market. Why are CPI numbers important? Why is the unemployment report important? What is happening when we are seeing these headlines? How does that correlate to interest rates? And so I was basically saying, hey, if you can't do that within 30 seconds, you don't truthfully understand it. And you've got to be able to give your customers a quick snapshot of what that's like. So before we do this challenge, I'm going to challenge you. I don't know if you know this is a coming or not, but we're going to challenge you to explain the market in 30 seconds. If you could just give us a longer version. Why do we look at the Treasury? Why do we look at CPI numbers? Like, how do those things, change the real estate market? And I'm going to challenge you to explain it within 30 seconds.
I got you. Yeah, so if you'll notice, the beard is a little shorter today. And so this is the sign that rates have stabilized, right? They're still high, but they're not going up anymore. And so when rates are going up, I don't shave. And so I was getting really woolly because we had like, I don't know, like 6 weeks of just straight rates going up, going up. They've now stabilized. We're not at a great spot, but at least they're not going higher for now. That could obviously change on Friday when the jobs report comes out. And people are saying, oh, wait a minute, why is the jobs report important? To your point, why is inflation important? And so I guess I'll give you the longer answer first, and then I will do my best to boil it down to 30 seconds. But in
Perfect.
the US, the Federal Reserve, which is an independent agency that sets a monetary policy for our country and really controls the short-term rates, which ultimately has a big influence on long-term rates, not directly correlated, right? Like we've now seen the Fed cut rates multiple times, but mortgage rates, long-term rates are actually worse. We'll get into that. But the Fed has a dual mandate. All right. Their mandate is to control inflation and to keep Americans employed. All right. So they have a target employment level and they have a target inflation level. All right. And the belief is that one of the greatest ways to control either too hot of an employment market or too cold of an employment market or too much inflation or deflation, too little inflation is interest rates. All right, the idea is that if the Fed cuts rates and borrowing becomes very cheap, that businesses will create more jobs, they'll invest more capital. But on the flip side, if rates get too low, then inflation can run hot, which increases the cost of goods and hurts people's ability for their living wage or their salary or hourly rate they earn to continue to buy the goods they need. And so the Fed is trying to thread this needle to keep us at the perfect level of inflation and the perfect level of employment. And so we all know that coming out of COVID, inflation got really out of control. And so the Fed went through this record pace of increasing rates to get inflation under control. They were late to the game. Initially, they thought that the inflation was what they were calling transitory, meaning it was not permanent. It was a temporary result of COVID, a temporary result of some shipping problems. If you guys remember back, like there was that ship that got stuck in the canal, and like all these like massive container ships had to reroute. You had countries closing down because of COVID. Like they thought it was transitory, that it was going to go away, and it didn't. And the inflation ended up being much stickier, much more persistent. These are the types of language that the Fed used. So they jacked rates up to a crazy high level, which brought mortgage rates up to a crazy high level. And we all kind of held our breath to see what was going to happen. And after now a couple years of really high rates, inflation is looking like it's under control. It's still not maybe as running as cold as they want to. And this is why we're watching those CPI numbers and PPI numbers. CPI is the consumer price index, PPI is the producer price index. So that's what is the price the consumer is paying, how much is it going up? And the producer price index is how much are the people actually making the stuff? Are they paying more for their goods, right? So if I manufacture widgets, am I paying more money for the steel to make my widgets? That's producer price index. And then consumer price index is, am I jacking the price up when I sell to the consumer? And so the Fed is looking at all this data. And so inflation is somewhat under control, but the employment situation just keeps running hot. Like we keep getting these super low unemployment numbers. Like everyone thought that by now unemployment would be up, that jobless claims would be up, that new job creation would be down, because that's part of what a cooling economy signals, and it's not happening. And so there's a lot of talk right now is like, is the Fed sticking this idea of a perfect soft landing? Like they just nailed it. They got it absolutely right. I don't believe that. Most people don't believe that. At some point, the belief is that the employment situation is going to crack. Now, if it doesn't, and inflation rears its head again, and the employment situation doesn't crack, and we keep at these really high levels of employment and wages keep going up, there is this thought now that the Fed may have to raise rates again. And nobody was thinking that 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. And that's why we've seen mortgage rates go back up. Because here's what you got to understand: the Fed is setting the overnight borrowing rates. So, again, the way our banking system works, if banks want to go borrow money from the Fed, they borrow it at whatever that Fed funds rate is, and they put that money out at that rate. That's for like a 1 day loan or a short term loan. Mortgage rates are 30-year loans, right? Fortunately, most people don't keep them for the full 30 years. They keep them on average for about 7 to 10, which is why mortgage rates benchmark themselves against the 10-year treasury. All right, 10-year treasury, that's a 10-year loan from whoever buys the bond to the US government. The US government uses that money to fund operations or whatever they need to do. 10-year duration, most mortgages last 10 years. The two of those really reflect each other. And so the fear is that even though the Fed has cut rates now, if the Fed stops cutting rates, or worse, if the Fed has to raise rates again, then the bond investors who are making those mortgages today will be out of position 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now. Because remember, they're making a 10-year commitment to that money. And so this is the very long answer as to why we've seen rates go back up.
And so we're going just slightly below the surface of, just, hey, I transact houses, I help you find a house, I just do the basics. You're starting to understand a little bit of the industry and what makes our industry tick, and how you can adjust your strategies within the industry at specific times of the year. And so I think it's really important that people understand that. So now we're going to do a challenge, Davey. We're going to try to see if you can do this in 30 seconds or so. I'm going to get a timer up on the screen, and we're going to see, can you explain that within 30 seconds? Hold on. So what's going to happen is you're going to have a countdown timer. It's going to go from 5 to 1. And then your 30 seconds is going to start. And you're going to have to see if you could explain that to a consumer, like, hey, if I'm thinking about purchasing in 2025, is it a bad time? That's going to be the response. Yeah. So 30 seconds or less.
All right, we're obviously coming off a very challenging year. You have decisions to make in your life about buying and selling. So I'm going to give you the quick rundown on where we are. We thought interest rates were going to come down in 2024. That obviously didn't happen. We saw them actually go back up because inflation has been a little stickier than we thought, and the employment situation is staying hotter than we expected. So the Fed is in a tough place. I'm here to guide you through this, though, and we have to understand is pricing dynamics are such that whether you buy now or sell now, you can always refinance later, and rates may be higher for longer, and now is the time to act.
You got it. You got it. Awesome, man. Awesome. That was fun.